I was born in Colombia, and when I was 7 years old, I came to the U.S. Everyone in my family had their papers, so my mom, my dad, and my big brother was actually born here. And it was only me that didn't have the papers, so the only option was either for them to leave me and come back after they had applied for the papers, or just not go at all. So turns out somewhere in the mix we met this family, and they've always said how they had a daughter same age as I was, and that apparently she looked a lot like me. So they got the really weird and bad idea of using her passport, which I can say that freely now because I am a U.S. citizen. So yeah, so I used her passport. My hair used to be like down to my waist, and I had to cut it. I had to put like tanning stuff on my face so I could look like her. And the only thing was that since they didn't want to run the risk, because if I was going to go with my parents, if they would question us or anything, they didn't want to run the risk. So I was 7 years old, and I had to go on the airplane by myself. Back then, we were never really a big church-going family, or we had pretty big issues. That was part of the reason why we decided to move to the U.S. Let's just say my dad was involved in things that shouldn't have been involved in. And so yeah, so then I got to the US, and throughout the whole time, all I remember is, sometimes whenever my dad was home on Saturdays, we would just read Psalms and like Proverbs just randomly. But like I said, we weren't a church going family. He would just do it randomly. So one of the Psalms that I'm sure like it's really big known, it was Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd and I shall not be in want. So all I remember is that while I was on the airplane, obviously I was freaked out. I mean, I was 7. I didn't know. All I knew how to say in English was yes and penny. That's all I knew, nothing else. So I was by myself, and yeah, so I just kept saying that in my head over and over again until I got here, and that's when I finally saw my mom. And so, it's been a process of 13 years since we've been here, and thankfully I got my papers through my dad, and it was pretty easy. But I think one of the biggest things that has always impacted me is knowing that when we used to live in Colombia, like I said, my dad was involved in things that, just bad things, and our family wasn't happy. My dad was a really big heavy drinker, and he was constantly just out of the house for like 3 days. He would disappear, and then he'd just come back randomly wearing the same clothes. And then my mom, obviously, because of that, she was very hurt. She was very bitter. And then when we got here, we started going to church, and I think that's one of the biggest things that has impacted my life, that has made me who I am. Just knowing that when we started going to church, obviously it wasn't like a ta-da, you guys are done and you guys are fixed. And it's still an ongoing process, but it was just the change that I saw in my dad himself. The change that, when we started going to church, and as he started getting into the Word of God, and as it started really touching himself and his life, he just started changing, and the difference between the person that my dad was and the person that he is today, it's what keeps me going, and my faith with God. It's what keeps me going, knowing that like if God did that to me, that was a miracle. Because I remember when I was a little girl, obviously you don't want to see your parents fight, so I remember lots of things that happened that it marked me. And it just knowing that my dad just was able to completely change, that to me keeps me going, with my relationship with God and with my faith in God, knowing I'm not perfect, knowing my family is not perfect, knowing my dad's not perfect, but just knowing that until here, God has always backed us up, and the fact that he brought us here to the US with the sole purpose of just keeping our family, because our family was falling apart, to me is amazing. So yeah, that's pretty much it.